Hoyne, welcome in.
Hello, Kane. Hello, G. Pleasure to be here.
A couple of people having a crack at me saying that I asked for texts, they send their text in, and I didn't put them to you. So I'm going to give you a couple of texts nice and early before we get stuck into your talking points.
Let's get into it.
J-Dog asks, Adam Treloar leads the comp for total disposals at 72.5% efficiency. Why is this guy still not considered for All-Australian honours? Now, who knows if he is or he isn't considered for All-Australian honours. It's a long way to go, Hoyne, but would he be in your All-Australian champion data side?
He's going to give us the All-Australian team next week, Kane, on official notice.
Yeah, so we're going to drop that next week once everyone's finished their buys and everyone's on leaving.
Park it.
But just to answer his question, just overall, we've spoken about Treloar on this show at times this year. His season, understandably, Bonk gets a lot of the credit, but his season has been phenomenal in terms of what he's doing, and he's changing his game. We talk a lot about the loose ball part of the game, and he absolutely dominates that. And off our rating system this year, this is his best season in 8 years.
Where's he rated in the competition?
34th best player in the comp at
good.
the moment. So he's going to be thereabouts in the All-Australian conversation
close
next week.
In terms of squad worthy. Can you ask Hoyne, please, what has changed at North Melbourne over the last 2 weeks that has made them more competitive?
Yeah, so I liked what I heard from a couple of North players post the West Coast performance, and they basically said that they got back to basics, and that basics being around clearance, contest, and pressure, and that's basically what you've seen from North over the last 3 weeks. I mean, it's really been hard to see any sort of positives in the first 10 to 11 weeks, but at least now over the last couple of weeks, they're starting to get their hands on the footy. Their midfield's having the impact that we thought that they could at the start of the year. That is their strength area. And then their pressure against West Coast and against Collingwood on the weekend. The first half pressure was phenomenal. And their pressure, even in their second half, was still actually okay. So at least you can go to the footy now if you're a North supporter and be able to hang your hat on something, unlike what you're able to do in the first 2 to 3 months of the season.
One more before we launch into your talking points for the week, and we'll put some more questions to Hoyne at the end. Does Champion Data log coaching moves and their effects? For example, Clarko's untagged move on Sunday, case in point, asked Craig in Geelong.
Yeah, we do. So we have two people at every game tracking all matchups that are on the ground, and we're able to actually assess the impact, both offensively and defensively from those matchups. So using the one from Sunday as the example, we're able to actually properly analyse the performance that Liam Shields did against Nick Dacos compared to the performance that Will Phillips did against Nick Dacos, and actually be able to deep dive and break down who had the greater impact against that particular opponent, like all opponents as well. So
would have been relatively clear, that one, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yes, it was. Yes.
Right, already enough said. What was your overall observation?
Yeah, so I like the point that that Kingy's made over the last couple of weeks around if you drop your gloves against certain opposition, you're in trouble for a period of time. So we've dubbed it, and I was speaking to him today, so we've dubbed it foot to the floor in 15. So basically what we're looking at is how many times this year within a quarter, in a 15-minute period, have you been able to whack 5 goals on the scoreboard and either get yourself back into the contest quickly or kill the game? And the reason why we're having a look at this is that you go back over the last 6 or 7 years, and I constantly say on this show that I'll go with history until history changes. So you think of Richmond in 19 and 20. The reason why they won their flags was the preliminary final against Geelong in 2019 and the grand final against Geelong in 2020, where they were up against it at halftime in both those games, close to 3 to 4 goals down at halftime. And then the start of the third quarter, they go whack within 15 minutes, game changes, they get through to a grand final, win it by 15 goals, and then they completely flip the game in the third quarter in 2020 and win the flag. You think everyone can think of Melbourne, grand final day, 2021. They're 3 goals down. Everything's going against them.
Half time.
Yeah. Well. Almost halfway through the third quarter, and then in the space of 10 minutes, they kick 6 goals, 7 goals. Game completely flips. They're premiers. Geelong started the grand final 2022. Within 15 minutes, whack, 5 goals, blow the game apart, all over. Boring grand final from there on. We think of Collingwood last year. They just within 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, they can come from anywhere. Whack, 5 goals, back in the game. Who cares what the actual margin was beforehand? So we're looking at the teams this year. And the Dogs keep coming up so high in everything that we're tracking at the moment. They've done it 6 times this year, the most of any team in the competition. Sydney and Carlton are the others that have done it 5 times this year. So we all laud the Swans, we know that, and I think we can all appreciate that Carlton have this ability to be able to do that. Then there's a significant gap to those that actually aren't doing it. So then, Brisbane and Freo are the next, that they've done it 3 times. So Freo, interesting, they didn't do it once at all in 2023. They've already done it 3 times in 2024. Keeps getting back to how they're playing. The interesting ones for us, GWS have only done it once this year. I don't know about you, Kane and G, but I look at GWS and I just assume that they're a team that can just go whack within a 15-minute period and change a game. We haven't seen that yet within 2024. They've only done it once this year. Geelong have only done it twice this year. The last 3 years, they've done it 6 times, 7 times, 9 times. Port Adelaide, that used to be their strength, their abilities to be able to go whack. We always had question marks defensively, but offensively, we really haven't had that. They've only done it twice this year. And Collingwood are the interesting ones as well. They've only done it twice this year. Once was actually on the weekend, just gone. So I'm not sure what you guys think, but if you haven't got that ability to be able to do it and do it when it's needed most, and so often, as I just alluded to before, there's so many examples that if you can't do it, are you in trouble towards the end of the season?
So my question is, what are the characteristics of the sides that can do it? And I assume it is centre clearance dominance or dirty ball out of the centre, which is rebounded off the half-back line.
Yeah, the centre bounce component to this is critically important. They're the cheap, easy, quick goals that can then change momentum critically. Carlton, Carlton have been really dominant at that. The Dogs on the weekend were unbelievable at that. Sydney are starting to get better at that. And if that's where you can get that. If you go back to what Melbourne did in that grand final and what Geelong did in the grand final in 2022, it was centre bounce dominance.
What about the teams that have those run-ons conceded against them? Because the Western Bulldogs might be great at doing it, but history would say they're shocking at getting it done to them. Like no team other than, I think, North and West Coast concede more run-ons than 5 in a row than the Dogs.
Yeah, and that's been the case for them over the last 2 to 3 seasons, not just a 1-year period. They're starting to get a bit better at that, so they're starting to get the balance tidied up with that. But that's actually a really good question. I'll come back to you next week.
Well,
with the
in the meantime, let's
get
stuck into your 7 main talking points, and we'll start at Port Adelaide.
Yeah, so you say this a lot, G, and I'm 100% with you, that the eye lies sometimes.
Unbelievable that it lies.
And I think the eye lies when it comes to Connor Rozee. And I think for the last 18 months, we've automatically bracketed Butters, Horne-Francis and Rozee together. And I'm just not sure whether or not Rozee is in that conversation at the moment.
Tell me what the numbers are saying.
And this isn't just on a performance level for 2024. This is based off what he's done throughout his career. So he's never been a top 70 rated player in the competition. He's never been a top 20 midfielder, just a midfielder, since he's gone into the midfield over the last 3 years. This year, his impact from a ball use perspective is 162nd in the competition. We don't associate that with Connor Rozee.
No.
So I think the eye assumes that he's this elite, creative, unbelievable ball user.
His second quarter against Essendon in whatever round it was, about round 5 or 6, it was the most magical quarter of footy I've seen from an individual this year.
And you know my theory on this, and I've spoken to you about this, I think it might have been on air and off air, that game was a Friday night game.
Yep.
Everyone's watching.
Yep.
And it was unbelievable what he did.
Yep.
That stays in your head.
It does.
Do you miss the 4:40 Sunday game? Do you miss the 1:10 Sunday game? Do you miss the 1:45 Saturday afternoon game? Because the reality is that was phenomenal. That was one of the highest rated games of the year.
Yep.
Absolutely brilliant.
But
what else has there been?
Yeah, okay. There's a big but.
What else has there been? Last 5 weeks, he has been involved in, last 5 games he's played. So he's been injured, I get that. I understand that. There's been a few players that have been injured as well. Last 5 games he's played, he's been involved in 15 scores in 5 games. So to put that into context, some players that have been involved in 15 scores in their last 5 games. Caleb Windsor, who's a first-year kid. Lloyd Meek, who's a developing ruckman, coming along nicely. Ollie Hollands, who's a young winger. And Jordan Boyd, who's a halfback flanker. He needs to get out of this group and out of this conversation.
What are the top liners involved in?
Butters is the man. He is clearly their best player. He is currently a top 20 player in the competition, has been a top 10 player more often than not.
How many score involvements?
He averages close to 7 to 8 score involvements a game. Horn Francis, his ability to change games and change momentum is there. I think we can all appreciate what he does and the impact that he has from a ball-winning perspective. And currently, at the moment, is rated higher, a lot higher than what Rozee is. So I just wonder whether or not this guy. Again, it's so easy just to bracket players together. We do that so often across the league. But whether or not, I don't know what you think, Kane, whether or not he needs to be deployed to a half-forward role that can go into the centre bounce. So he's involved in 61 centre bounces again. 61% of Poyet centre bounces, which is the same ratio as Horn Francis. I just don't think that balance is right for me with what he's producing at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not there with you. I'm not as scathing. He's a dual All-Australian his last 2 seasons. He's one of best and fairest. They've given him the captaincy for a reason, and he did his hammy against the Saints, so came off. So that's one of the games you're talking about. He played the next week with that torn hammy in the showdown. That's one of the games you're talking about. He rolled his ankle against North and went forward in that win. That's one of the games you're talking about. And on the weekend, he was poor. That was his first game back since round 12. So I think players get injured. I think the last 5 weeks is really harsh on him considering the lack of continuity. Having said that, I was incredibly disappointed with his performance on the weekend, regardless of the lack of preparation. He just wasn't there physically. He probably missed 4 or 5 tackles, 14 touches, looked out on his feet and didn't have an impact. But, gee, I'd love him in my side. There'd be 18 teams that would cry out for a player of like he had 644 touches and kicked 21 goals last year, and add the clearances in, 94 clearances. So yeah, I'm not there with you. I tend to rate him a lot higher than that.
But if you're rated as the 70th best player in the competition, you're a very good footballer. You're a top 10% player across the competition.
Some would say he's in the best 22.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. And this is where I'm getting at, does the eye lie? Because, you reference disposals. Like, we keep talking, it's not about disposals. It's about the impact that you're having with the ball in hand. And he looks really good. And of course, all 18 teams would have him as an absolute walk-up start. I'm not saying he's a poor footballer. I'm just more having the broader discussion. Does he sit in the same conversation as a Zach Butters? So I look at it and our staff look at it and go, he's an out-and-out superstar of the competition. That changes games. This guy is a very good player. You have to be a very good player to be the 70th best player in the competition. But are you in that conversation for players that change games? Because I sit there and I could be wrong here, Kane, and I'm sure people will come to me, but I can't remember him changing a game like Zach Butters does. I can't remember him doing what Zach Butters did in quarter 4 against Hawthorn, where he changes the game. I think Horn Francis doing what he did, a couple of times this year. We look at it and go, he's single-handedly changing a game here. He's a very good footballer. I'm just not sure whether or not he sits in the same conversation as the other two.
Food for thought from Hoyne. You can have your say 0433 98 11 16. Are the Lions coming or not?
I heard you on the way in, and I know that I was going to talk about Brisbane and talking about the confidence that you have amongst teams. And I honestly cannot remember a season where we're 14 games in, and I've got 8 teams this year, and now Brisbane are one of them, where their profiles within a 14-game period have flipped so significantly.
Wow.
That's half the competition. And I'm not looking at North and West Coast and East. I'm looking at the finals contenders. So Geelong, Carlton, Dogs, GWS, Essendon, Collingwood and Hawthorn have at some stage this year had a horrific profile, and then at some stage this year have had a really strong profile. Yeah, add Brisbane into that conversation now. So I think we can all appreciate and see what's happening over the last 6 weeks with Brisbane. So the core 4 stuff that myself and Kingy track, they are the number 1 offensive team in the competition. They're back to what their point of difference and what their asset has been for the last 5 years.
It's amazing how they've replaced what they lost. Like Kai Lohmann has come in, and
Logan Morris.
Logan Morris is a magnificent
And a fantastic
new hybrid
addition.
coming through.
Yeah. But there is a but. There's always a but with these conversations. Red flags and big red flags to what is happening defensively.
Right.
So they are now the third worst without the footy team in the competition over the last 6 weeks. That is the biggest red flag for me, and that is not getting it done. And you know I've been big on Brisbane for the year. The reason why I was big on Brisbane for the year is that even when they were struggling the first 8 weeks of the year, their defensive profile, they were the hardest team in the competition to turn possession into a score against. They're now the 5th easiest. They were the hardest team to move the ball against in the first 8 weeks of the year when they weren't getting the wins. They're now the 4th easiest. They had the 6th best defensive 50 in the competition. They now have the 4th worst defensive 50 in the competition. And no team was picking off the opposition between the arcs more than what Brisbane was doing. Now they do that the 6th least.
Who's dropped off their intercept work?
I think it's a combination of everyone. So, and the biggest issue to this, they keep talking about the turnover game, that is 60% of scoring. Right now they are the 4th easiest team in the competition to score against off turnover. And when you win the ball back off turnover against Brisbane and get it inside 50, they're the 2nd easiest team to score against in that aspect. So, like I look at it, and this is why it is so hard to win a flag and to be successful and to have the perfect game, because offensively was their issue the first 8 weeks of the year.
They've sorted that out.
Accuracy in their forward 50 was the biggest issue, but defensively they were strong. Now that's flipped, and I would still rather have the without the footy profile than what you're doing offensively. So that game on Saturday is going to be a really interesting watch to see how this holds up with what they're doing offensively compared to what they're doing defensively at the moment. So I'm not as bullish as what a lot of other people are at the moment with Brisbane, purely because of what's happening here from a defensive perspective.
All right, what about the Blues? This one is another big game that they're involved in this weekend.
Yeah, massive contest, this one. So looking forward to this on Friday night. So always interested with teams that are coming off off a bye, and clearly everyone, when you get to that that bye situation, you get the opportunity to actually review what's actually happened in the first 10, 11, 12, 13 games, whatever you might have played, and sort of look to correct and improve your profile based off what you've been able to sort of analyse. And Carlton are doing a lot right at the moment, but there's like the rest of the competition, probably outside of Sydney at the moment, there are room for improvement. Their number one room for improvement is what they're doing from a ball movement perspective, and can they actually start to generate a little bit more? They were pretty good against Essendon in terms of that aspect, but in terms of what they've done over the last 6 weeks, in terms of their ball movement from D50 to forward 50, it's the 7th worst in the competition, and that sort of halfback counter punch area, it's the 3rd worst in the competition. And I just want to explain why that's the case. So quite often teams win the ball behind centre and are happy to kick long to a contest, get it, and get it out of there and actually gain some territory. When you actually are implementing that play, that long down the line play, AFL teams win that possession 50% of the time. So 1 in 2, pretty good strike rate. Over Carlton's last 4 games, when they've gone long down the line and happy to kick to a contest, they're winning the ball 20% of the time. So to put that into context, that is the worst return we have seen by any team over a 4-game period in 9 years.
There's no Bossy hasn't been sunbaking in the off week. He needs to be addressing the.
It is. It's amazing, and we keep. And I keep thinking about it, going, geez, they're a contest team. That's you kick long, and you're going to get Cripps there and Walsh there, but their inability to be able to win that contest is at levels, as I said, that we haven't seen in 9 years. So what they do with that, and the three of us have had this conversation on the show a lot of the year around the two rucks, and how that works. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they do from a match.
Do you think it
perspective.
directly correlates to that, having the extra ruckman there, having Pitnet in the side, or not? Because we know it impacts around their clearance work.
Yeah, so I'm interested just to see what they do with this, because Harry is the one who's the long down the line play for them to start winning these contested possessions. So in terms of, of all Carlton players in the competition, this year, he's fourth at Carlton, only behind Walsh, Cripps and Newman in terms of winning a contested possession between the arcs in general play. So whether or not they look at this and they go, this is so important to us because we can't keep going, at numbers like this, so we have to have Harry play permanently as this forward that's, between the arcs, competing in this long down the line play, or are we actually going to revert to actually not being a long down the line team and actually try and switch the footy? So when Carlton actually don't go long down the line and are happy to take the ball to the other side of the ground and actually change angles and switch the footy, they are the best team in the competition at generating an inside 50.
Okay,
they just do that the second least of any team in the competition. So a real case study this weekend, Friday night, when you're sitting there watching Carlton, are they going to go to work on this and figure out, no, we're not going to be a long down the line team. We're actually going to try and change angles and work our way around Geelong? Or if we are going to be a long down the line team, we're selecting Pitnet in this team. And we're selecting Pitnet because Harry is going to be the 100% key forward that is going to play this role to help correct this aspect of the game that could then correct their ball movement game.
If Harry, and we'll just use Harry as an example, if Harry was in a one-on-one contest, what sort of percentage return would you expect him to win of say, 100? How many percent is a good return?
For Harry, I would say probably about 30%.
Right.
So winning 1 in 3 and not losing, probably only losing 15 to 20% of them. So then just giving yourself a chance to actually win that contest, not all about him actually winning it. So, there's as I said, there's areas for improvement amongst everyone pretty much other than Sydney. That there, is a significant and basic area for improvement for Carlton.
Who do you like in that game, Hoyne?
I'll have to go with Carlton because I just don't like what Geelong's profile looks at the moment. Fascinated to see what the inclusion of Dangerfield does to the Geelong mix. What about yourself?
Dangerfield back in. I think I might go with Geelong in this game
fascinating game.
For no reason whatsoever. But it is a Tuesday, so that may change before those tips are filed. All right, guess who at this time each and every Tuesday? What is the clue tonight? And then you can submit your guesses.
Yeah, so first 12 rounds of the year, this team was 15th for contested possessions. Their last 2 games, they have been plus 55. They've gone from 15th in contested footy to the last 2 weeks being plus 55.
Which team was going really ordinary in contested footy and they've completely turned it around in the last fortnight? Guess who? Who was 15th for contested footy and in the last fortnight they have turned it around? A lot of love for Sydney, a lot of love for Hawthorn off the text machine. Gerard, who was your guess?
I would have gone the Kangaroos.
Yeah, a lot of love for North too.
Yeah, I would have gone North as well.
A lot of love for North and a bit of Dogs and a bit of Brisbane, but it is the Swans. So, so we just mentioned before that there are a lot of teams and pretty much every team in the comp other than the Swans that have significant areas for improvement. We did mention before they went on their bye around their centre bounce game.
Yep.
And I was really interested around Chad Warner, and he was interviewed by Howie pre-game for Fox ahead of the Sydney-Geelong game. So their centre bounce...
Tom Harley monitors this show.
So their centre... good evening, Tom. So their centre bounce game pre-bye, the Swans, was the 3rd worst in the competition. Now, the last 2 games post-bye, they've won it by 16 in total. The contested possession game, as we said, was the 4th worst contested possession game in the comp pre-bye. They're plus 55. They're plus 30 contested possessions in the second half against the Crows on the weekend, which is just a ridiculous number. And more importantly, what they're doing at post-clearance contests has gone from the 3rd worst to being plus 18 over the last 2 weeks. I just want to give a couple of individuals some love. So, rightly so, Heaney, Warner, Goulden and Grundy, over the last 2 weeks have received a lot of the praise. But what James Rowbottom has done to this centre bounce profile, it's only 2 games, I understand that, but he is their centre bounce clearance player. He has won 13 centre bounce clearances in the 2 games since the bye. The next best Swan is 4. So it's not Heaney.
Underrated.
It's not Warner. It's not Grundy that's doing this centre bounce work. It's him. And it's the perfect balance, getting it out to Warner, getting it out to Heaney, getting it out to Goulden, and letting them do the damage. So for him to have 13, centre clearances the last 2 weeks, he's had 28 contested possessions in 2 weeks. And then someone else who had a bit of controversy around him to start the season in terms of this post-clearance profile, Sam Wicks.
Yep.
So Sam Wicks, ahead of the footy, has been Sydney's number 1 post-clearance player since the bye. He's won 15, which is a ridiculous number.
Some had him in the media had him in selection trouble this week.
No. He's one of those players, and I heard you, Kane, mention before, around the Hawks and their ability to be able to get up and back and down the ground. He's one of those ones that's the role player that the premiers have, that internally would be getting recognised significantly. Externally, hard to appreciate the role that he's actually having. He's not going anywhere, I don't think, at the moment. What they do when Luke Parker arrives, in 3 to 4 weeks' time, that might be a different story. But at the moment, he's going nowhere.
And Mills is the other one, I guess, that'll come back at some stage that they would hope. So they'll have to shuffle the decks there. All right, let's continue with these 7 main talking points. What was that from Freo?
Yeah, strange. And I heard you say, gee, it was too bad that you almost throw it in the bin. And I'm a little bit with you, but I'm not totally with you.
Good.
So, at times the basic numbers again can lie. So Freo, everyone looks at it, everyone can see, Freo are number 2 for points against this year. How good's their defence? They're the 3rd best defensive 50 in the competition, and and they protect turnover better than most. It's a little bit of a false economy, because they're number 2 in the competition for a couple of reasons. One, their opposition at times has been inaccurate this year. And 2, because they don't allow their opposition to have the ball as often and start with the ball as often as what some teams do, because of their method of play where they're a high uncontested marking team, that can sort of protect the points against profile. So when the opposition start with the footy against Freo are the 8th easiest team in the comp to score against, right? So from a turnover perspective, they've conceded the 2nd fewest points in the competition. But when they give the ball back to the opposition, which doesn't happen as often because they play this protective way, they're the 7th hardest team to actually score against. Their clearance game is the issue for me. And I think that there is such a reliance on this, and I just wonder whether or not it's too big of a reliance. So overall, in terms of how many points they've conceded from clearance, it's the 6th fewest of any team.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the 6th fewest because they win raw clearance far more often than anyone else does in the competition. So when the Oppo do get their chance to win it at clearance, and if you come up against a reasonable clearance team, Freo are actually the 5th easiest team to score against. So you think about what Collingwood did to them a couple of weeks ago. They went to work on them. They beat them at clearance, and Collingwood should have won that game by 4 or 5 goals. They completely obliterated Freo and should have opened them up by a little bit more. The Dogs on the weekend got close to breaking even in clearance and piled on 10 goals or 11 goals from clearance. And I don't know what you two think, but I just picture from a turnover perspective, you can set the game up in a tactical way where you can protect your one-on-one plays, and protect your defenders, with ball in hand, if you like. But from a clearance perspective, that's when your defenders are going to be isolated and required to defend for a 10 to 15 second period, more often than not, by themselves. So this year, Freo are the 2nd worst one-on-one defensive team in the competition. Draper, Ryan, and even Alex Pearce have poor one-on-one numbers.
Surprised about Pearce. Is that a
Pearce
recent drop off? He started
recently.
well, didn't he?
Correct, yeah, so recently. So that's why this clearance game...
Isn't that one of the great examples of the eye lying? You remember the 1 or 2 at the start?
Yeah.
Has a carryover effect.
Fallen away a little bit over the last couple of weeks. So that's why this clearance game for Freo, it is all on this midfield to perform at a rate where they need to almost win clearance by 10 to 11 or 12 a game. We mentioned a couple of weeks ago that their clearance numbers were on track for a record-breaking season. It needs to be that way to protect this defence. If it's not, this defensive profile will be exposed like it was exposed by the Dogs on the weekend and like it was exposed by the Pies a couple of weeks ago where they should have got the win and should have got the win by a couple of goals. So just putting that on watch at the moment for the Dockers.
Well, that is a big one to watch because I think most people would argue, including myself, that their defence was reasonably sound.
Yeah, I'll just put it on watch and we'll just see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
Tell us about Harry Sheezel. He was rated really highly a week or so ago, Hoyne.
Yeah, so love what Sheezel's doing, and what he did, in the last quarter, probably reflected a little bit of what the whole midfield group, for North Melbourne, what they were actually doing. But the role that he's done over the last 6 or 7 weeks, he's no longer that player that you're going to look down at the stat sheet and he's going to have 30, 35, and you're going to recognise him. He is one of these players that has completely flipped his game for the absolute greater good of the team, and he's now having the impact that we see from the best in the competition. So over the whole season now, he's only, what is he, second year, third year, whatever
Second
he is.
year, yep.
He is now a top 30 rated player across the competition, because what he's doing with ball in hand and his ball winning ability is so dangerous and so clean. So we talk a lot about the post clearance ball, that being king. This guy is one of them, and I think we can all now appreciate, what Nick Dacos does from a contest, profile. He is a contested possession player. He just does it differently. This guy's not Nick, but he's not too dissimilar to what he does from a contested possession profile. You might not recognise it, you might not appreciate it, but when you go back and watch it off vision, some of the stuff that he's doing from a contest perspective is special and it's clean and it's having the impact that is going to change North Melbourne and is going to change him for the greater good. So I just want to just give him a little bit of a shout out, to what he's doing over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks in particular.
Okay, well done to Hattie. Just needs to build that tank so he can fire further in that last quarter. GWS, some interesting stuff from them.
Yeah, so we put them on watch a couple of weeks ago in terms of what they're doing from their turnover game. Worst turnover team in the competition for a 6-week period after being the best turnover team in the competition in the first 7 or 8 weeks of the year. And I'm not sure what you think, Kane or G, but that one game sample, that looked far more like GWS.
Better, didn't it?
Far more like GWS.
Kane has got them now just a skerrick away from a lock.
I just think when it all comes together for them, they've got a lot of upside with the way that they play. The defence is rock solid. I think their midfield.
Interesting, they went for a tagger this week, a
hard
tagger.
Gee, that was a great move as we discussed yesterday.
Yeah, wasn't it?
The coaching from Adam Kingsley, I think, is cutting edge. I think Brett Montgomery is his right hand man. He's as smart as anyone. So
what about Toby? How's Toby tracking?
Well, he kicked 1-5, so it would have been a lot better if it was 5-1.
He's getting better in terms of his around the ground sort of impact.
What about his contest?
But he's 1-on-1, and we're just having a look at this in the ad break. His 1-on-1, contest numbers. He's actually the worst 1-on-1 contest player in the competition this year.
Staggering.
And I keep seeing him smack his smack his hand on the ground after a 1-on-1. He's been involved in 16 1-on-1s this year, Toby, yet to win one, which is unbelievable. Never like him. He's usually, over the last couple of years, he's gone at winning almost every second 1-on-1 contest. So the other person I just want to put on the agenda here with GWS. So 2 parts to this. Their run and handball game, that is everything to them. If they get this up and going, so when they gain over 400 metres by hand, they gain 650 against Port, to put that into context, 6th most of any team this year. When they gain over 400, they've done that 9 times, they've lost once for the year. Mm-hmm. When they get that aggression going, they are so hard to stop. When they don't, they've won 1 out of 5 games for the year. Very simple, I understand that, but when you're seeing it just there on the, sort of whether that be live or off vision, when they get that handball run and gun game going, it's just so hard and so hard to stop.
One final one just off the text. Somebody was listening last night where I said that Collins and McGovern were the 2 highest rated defenders. And this person is saying, isn't Hattie Himmelberg rated higher? He must be confusing it on a rankings, I assume, because
No, Harry's going well. Yeah, no, Harry's going well. It's
You
just,
said that last week. Where is he, though, as in concern?
No, well, it's just whether or not you categorise him as a key defender anymore. I wouldn't categorise him as a key defender.
Right.
And I actually would say
What would you
he's
call him
not a
as a
key defender.
halfback?
He's a halfback, roamer, interceptor, ball user. But people look at him, he's under 94 centimetres and assume he's a key defender. He doesn't play on opposition key forwards anymore, Harry, and nor should he. His number one strength is his ball use and creativity with ball in hand. So leave that to the other bloke.